Welcome back to the program. Now, the International Monetary Fund has approved the third installment of a $12 billion three-year loan for Egypt. This brings the total release to date to just over $6 billion. The fund's board approved the latest $2 billion disbursement under the deal signed in November last year. Just last month, the fund praised Cairo's progress on what is described as bold economic reforms. That said, let's dig a little deeper into what exactly these reforms are and how they've worked out so far. Yasser Kim is live in Cairo tonight with more data. He joins us now live from that location. Yasser, so Egypt's deficit, let's start with that, still fairly high, roughly 10.9% of GDP. What is the plan to gradually lower it?
Yes, it's still high, although the government had expected it to go around 10 last year, but the forecast from the World Bank, which was announced last month, would be like 8.8% by the end of the fiscal year 2017-18. Simply, the government will continue its economic reforms. It will less expenditure, less imports, more reforms, less subsidies, more cut on energy subsidies in particular. There will be more tax reforms, and VAT will be felt more. There's the real estate tax that's also going to get more revenue, so tax reforms and more revenue from taxes. And then you've got more revenue from FDIs. Foreign direct investments are improving at $10 billion expected next year. It's already to $8.5 billion this year. And the production, exports and production, obviously, of natural gas, that's expected to really make a big difference for the country soon.
Indeed. Speaking of gas, Rosneft said barely 24 hours ago, gas output from the Zohr gas field has started. I remember Egypt used to be a net gas exporter. Right now, though, it's a net importer of the same. When will it get back to the other side of the equation?
Yeah, it's not just gas. Egypt was famous worldwide for cotton, for example. There are a lot of sectors that used to be really strong and now they're importing. But for gas, it's turning around. The first stage should see a 350 million cubic feet of gas per day production. By June, end of June 2018, we're told it's going to be about 1 billion cubic feet per day from gas, and by the end of, and that will mean Egypt will be self-sufficient by the end of 2018, end of 2019, beginning of 2020. That's when Egypt, at 2.7 billion cubic feet per day of gas, will be able to export, and thus we can see revenue coming from there. And obviously, starting mid or last quarter of 2018, Egypt will not need to import, so that will save a lot of dollars for the government that will be needed in other sectors, and also will help in the budget deficit.
Indeed. Should be interesting to see the effect that has on the current account deficit. The IMF, though, spoke of the need not to just cut unemployment in Egypt, but also to better integrate women into the workforce. What sort of obstacles do women face in just getting into the labor force and advancing their careers in Egypt?
Yes, it's more about traditions and culture, especially with the low-income bracket of the country, of the community, where it's not easy for girls. It's easier than before, but many girls are not able to go to school and until they graduate from university, as hoped for, and they're working hard on this now with social projects to help and encourage families to let the girls go to college, especially that the poor families and the culture, they can let the girls marry at an early age to lift the burden of the family, the financial burden of the family. So this is being cured by the government now. You've got also training for women to be able to have the channel to train, to learn how skills for work. And then obviously the movement from one area to another is not easy for women if they want to look for jobs in other cities, in other villages. Obviously this is kind of a setback for them. There are projects to encourage women to go into SMEs in the villages, to have their own businesses, to make their own kind of living and learn skills that can bring them revenue. So it's taking time, but obviously it's a bit about culture and traditions more than, and obviously the economic side more than anything.
Indeed. One last question for you, Yasser. Egypt is holding presidential elections next year. Should we expect that election process, the run-up to the election, to affect the economic reforms that we've seen so far?
The government said it will not change its economic reforms, but we expect it going to slow down, at least for the months leading to the presidential elections. It would be wise to do so. No need to really, for example, lift subsidies on fuel just before elections, and also increase taxes and so forth. There is a plan for more cuts on fuel and energy. But this could be at the end of the fiscal year, which is around next June or July, and that would be probably after the elections, the presidential elections. But before the elections, I think this will slow down. And it was mentioned during the discussions and talks between the IMF and the Egyptian officials here in Cairo around a couple of months ago, when they were discussing the next batch. And the government said that it might slow down its reforms a while until the presidential elections, or at least for the first and second quarter of 2018. And then it would be fair enough, continue on the path probably by June or July of next year.
Indeed. We'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you for the update. That's Yasser Hakim there live, of course, in Cairo.